Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayana Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudiraye. Hare Krishna. So, thank you for joining us for our session of sharing on Srimad Bhagavatam. We are continuing with the discussion of the second canto. And very specifically, in the previous session, we touched upon the topic of Grahastha versus Grahamedi. And the understanding was that the Grahamedi has a very narrow focus, very specifically based on their extended family, and sometimes the conception of their focus and identity extends to their tribe, perhaps to the country, perhaps to a certain race beyond the country. The point is, the Grahamedi conception is narrow, and the identities that come on a course of that particular conception of life are also limited in scope. And when you establish an identity that is very limited in scope, so for instance, you have people fighting for a certain kind of rights. So you have, for example, groups that fight for the rights of a certain, I would say, acculturation, or there can be feminist groups which identify with the body being feminine. There can be white supremacists who identify with the body being white. And then there are supremacists, or I wouldn't call them supremacists, I would say there's a focus on sexual orientation. There's gay pride. These days you have those big proceedings, where you have those big processions around the world on certain days where they want to identify themselves with sexual orientation and then present themselves within a certain function. These are different groups which are in general envious of each other, because in reality, enviousness is born out of material desires. It is born out of identification into a certain subsect of existence. The Vaishnava conception, however, extends to the well-being of the entire creation. A Vaishnava, when the Vaishnava is acting, they're acting for the well-being of the entire creation. When the Vaishnava, for example, even does what I would call as cursing, for example, when Sri Narad Muni cursed the sons of Kubera, Nala Kubera and Manigriva, it was beneficial to the entire existence, because through the curse, they became a part of the eternal pastime of the Lord as Damodar. So the point being is that even when the Vaishnava does an apparently destructive act of cursing, that leads to a greater benefit to the entire universe, to the entire creation, simply because the Vaishnava conception is all-encompassing. It is based on compassion. The compassion is based on Harinam. The Vaishnava compassion is based on the identity of the soul in relationship to Krishna in the mood of service. So it is based on the sambandha and the abhideya and the prayojana that comes out of that relationship. In other words, the Vaishnava conception of what the future is and what kind of activity is beneficial is in reality connected to the Supreme Lord. And this is inconceivable. It is inconceivable to someone who has a very narrow scope of understanding, someone who thinks in terms of their body, someone who thinks in terms of their mental state or psychological state, someone who thinks in terms of certain frailties or immediate surroundings. Yeah, this is basically temporary, and these temporary means of adjusting to the material world are simply a cause for enviousness. One group becomes envious of the other. When a group of countries sit together with their representatives in the United Nations, they're simply a group of envious people. They're just envious simply because you cannot be anything else. Why is it so? Because if you have material desires, the manifestation of envy is but natural. If you have material desires, the manifestation of envy is but natural. As a consequence, these different groups who have identified with the material nature in different ways, they have identified with the race, they have identified with the geography, they have identified with the body in different ways. They have material desires, and those material desires make them very envious. Enviousness is a matter of wanting something but also wanting the other person who has it to be destroyed. That is the reason why the attitude of a serpent, the attitude of a snake, is considered to be envious, and it's equated to enviousness because the snake wants to destroy the existence of the other person. The snake, the poisonous, venomous snake, is unable to distinguish a 3-year-old child from a 30-year-old man. A venomous snake is unable to distinguish between a 3-year-old child's ability to cause harm versus a 30-year-old man. It strikes out in envy, wanting to just destroy. One may say that it is threatened, but in reality, what threat could a 3-year-old boy pose to a venomous snake? He cannot pose any kind of threat. In reality, it's nature. It just strikes out and destroys. So this is enviousness. And so when a group of people are identifying with a small, narrow scope of manifestation of material nature, there can be nothing but envy in such a gathering. And out of envy, there can only be destruction. There can be nothing beneficial that would come out, nothing at all. And as a consequence, the best conception and the greatest service one could do is to adopt Vaishnavism. Krishna consciousness is the greatest service one could do simply because they would benefit the entire creation, they would benefit beyond creation. Everybody is benefited by someone who is a Vaishnava, who is very sincere in their practice. Everybody is benefited. And this is the best way to get rid of envy. The best way to get rid of envy is to focus on the Vaishnava conception of service. Last week, we spoke about it, and we also said very clearly that you must engage in menial service in the environment that you are in if you want to get rid of enviousness. Why is it so? Why was this said that one must engage in menial service to get rid of enviousness? This was spoken of particularly because when you engage in menial service, every other identity melts away. One may be a PhD, one may be highly situated in their workplace, one may be extraordinarily qualified, but the day you pick up a broom and the day you pick up a mop and a bucket and you start cleaning the temple, we are nothing but servants. So the conception of service becomes so crystal clear. There's no confusion. There is no confusion. So in reality, it's a very, very powerful platform. It's a very powerful platform for the Vaishnavas to contribute to menial service, because that menial service establishes the identity of being a servant of the Lord very efficiently and quickly. It is very efficient. Yeah, it is very, very efficient. It is almost instantaneous when it just establishes itself, because you can't have misconceptions. There is a devotee in our movement who was a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, who is a disciple of Srila Prabhupada. The day he joined Srila Prabhupada, the moment he joined and he walked in, he met Srila Prabhupada. He was a PhD in some lofty subject, I think archaeology. And the moment he walked in the temple, Srila Prabhupada did not give him any sophisticated service. He told him to go to the kitchen and clean the pots. And the reason is that that's the most beneficial service one can give to establish the identity of being a servant very efficiently and quickly. In every other service, there can be a little bit of misconception. If one is a manager, you could have a misconception. When one has more important services, apparently in the eyes of the visitors in the temple or in the ashram, you could have some important service. That basically adds to an identity or a layer of eliteness. It adds to I would say, there's a flavor of eliteness which comes in if you become a part of an important aspect of service. And that establishes an identity. That establishes an identity, and that establishes subtle attachments. The attachments themselves are subtle. You cannot experience it. You wouldn't even know we are attached, but it establishes a subtle attachment. Now, that is an additional layer that has to be cleansed. If there is subtle attachment, it is even more difficult to cleanse it because you can't see it. It is not apparent, it is not very clearly seen that we have attachments. And as a consequence, it's a struggle to cleanse it. So the point being that in a relative sense, picking up a broom and cleaning up the temple floor is very straightforward. It's insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but it aids in bhakti enormously. It squashes down the identity of the person very efficiently establishes that this person is a servant of the Lord. Very efficiently. This is very useful. And the reason it is very useful, very specifically in the West. In the Western countries, this kind of service is very useful because in the Western countries, there's active participation with material energy, which has nothing to do with Krishna. There's active participation. We can't help but be in touch with aspects or manifestation of material energy, which are directly or indirectly, they have no connection whatsoever. In India, for instance, if you're in Vrindavan, in the Dham, you could be in touch with so many different aspects of Krishna consciousness whilst doing nothing. So one can say that if you were to just lie down in some corner of Vrindavan, then you benefit enormously because you're in touch with Krishna. Krishna is the Dham. But that's not the case with the Western society. Western society, there are many, many layers of very complicated separation between us and Krishna, which are created by Western society simply because there has no knowledge of the existence of the Lord. There isn't. As a consequence, the senses and the mind come in touch with matter far more profoundly in Western society than they do in a society which is Krishna conscious. When senses and matter, they come in touch with very profoundly with matter, the only way for purification is through menial service. So if there's an opportunity for menial service, and if you are in the Western country, take it up because it's a must. There really isn't any other way to purify ourselves because our senses are actively in touch. They're actively in touch with matter. If you exist there and you want to exist in the Western country, we don't really exist to serve. In many cases, we are definitely serving, there's no doubt, but we don't really plan to serve there. In certain ways, it's not so much that we plan that this is beneficial for my service. So I must have a home, I must settle down. We don't really think in terms of service when we do this. So as a consequence, most of what we do when we are outside of, let's say, the Dham is basic existence. And if it is in the West, there's absolutely no contact with Krishna consciousness. The senses become very contaminated because they are directly in touch with the objects of the senses all the time. There's clear contamination. So the point we are trying to make is service is very important. Menial service is extraordinarily beneficial because it knocks the false ego down very efficiently. By performing menial service, one can get rid of envy. By performing menial service, one can get rid of the objects, the certain propensity for false finding. Yes. We all engage in fault finding. The propensity for fault finding can be knocked down very efficiently by menial service. If we engage in menial service, we automatically have the ability to develop the conception of being a das. The conception of being a das or a dasi is very efficient if you do menial service. By doing that, one automatically becomes focused on service, and as a consequence, they're able to see themselves as being, the servant of the others, servant of the servants. And this is very important because it really takes out envy. Now, as we go further in this chapter, we're going to understand further as to why this is going to be very important. See, very important for us to understand that we constantly position ourselves and engage in activity which can establish our identity as a servant. This is our sadhana. Our whole sadhana, our whole experience of sadhana is to strengthen and foster the identity of being Krishna's servants. This is the whole objective of sadhana. You wear clothes, a certain kind of posture, you wear tilak, you worship deities, you call yourself by a certain name after initiation, you chant the holy names of the Lord, you worship the deity, you honor prasadam, which has been offered to the Lord. This is reinforcing our identity of being servants of Krishna. This is basically to reinforce the identity. But the identity of being Krishna's servant is very firmly and nicely reinforced if one consciously engages in menial service. Lord Chaitanya, he refused to meet the king, Pratap Rudra. He completely refused to meet Pratap Rudra, even though Pratap Rudra, the king of Orissa, during the time of Lord Chaitanya, was making repeated requests that you must somehow or the other grant me an audience. He was trying to come in touch with Lord Chaitanya through different means. Lord Chaitanya was in sannyas ashram, and according to Smriti Shastra, according to scriptural injunction, sannyasis are not supposed to associate with positions of power. They're not supposed to associate for long with kings, especially. Now, Lord Chaitanya did not want to meet with him because he found that the attitude which King Prataprudra had at that time was that he was a king. He was just waiting for an opportunity to connect with this devotee, but he was waiting to see how the transition would occur from being a king to being a servant. So the day Prataprudra picks up a broom and starts cleaning the pathway where Jagannath's chariot has to proceed, Mahaprabhu accepts him. Mahaprabhu accepts Prataprudra because the identity of being a king is given up the moment he picks up a broom and starts sweeping in front of the chariot of Lord Jagannath. Then what happens is you really can't be a king and a sweeper. Now you are a sweeper for the Lord. You are a servant. You are engaging in menial service. Now that identity of being a king has been knocked out and you are now a servant. Now you can serve. You can connect with me. Lord Chaitanya gives him an audience. So the point we're trying to make is that there are certain things that we should strategically do to reinforce our identity. One of the strategic activities is to position ourselves in such a way that we engage in menial service. It's actually very purifying, and the reason it is purifying is because it reinforces the identity of being a das or a dasi very efficiently and very quickly. So even if you have other important services to offer in your yatras, take some time out to be able to do this. Take some time out during the week to be able to engage in some menial service. It could just be that you go and then sweep the temple. It could be that you sweep the temple floor. You engage in some kind of cleansing, something which basically knocks us down to being purely a servant, where we realize that, okay, you can't really conceive of anyone who is sweeping the floor and cleaning the kitchen or washing the pots as being anything but servant. There's confusion is very less there. Yeah. Of course, there can be confusion even there. One can develop some false ego. But the point which I'm trying to make is that the chances of being very entrenched and getting caught up is actually quite minimal. So one needs to basically do that. Yeah. Now let's go through some of the verses here, because this is an interesting chapter where Sukadev Goswami, he is not directly getting into the topic of bhakti. Srila Sukadev Goswami is getting into a comparative study in this particular chapter. The comparative study, he talks about different systems of philosophies for people to be able to come in touch with. And then he talks about efficiency. Now, why is this chapter so important for us? In this chapter, the focus is that you have an individual, Parikshit Maharaj, who has only 7 days to live. So the question then becomes, how do you use your 7 days? It's very limited. What is it that you can do which is very efficient? What is a process that you can adopt which is very efficient? So this topic becomes very important in this particular chapter. And there are steps given. There are many steps given by Srila Sukadev Goswami to prepare for death. It is actually very important. He's practically saying that even if you're actively engaged in Krishna's service, there are a few things that you'll have to do in certain ways, yeah, which help you focus. And we can learn from this particular chapter. So let's go to text 4. Deha patya kalatradishva atma shainasva asatvasapi teshan brahmatto nidanam pashyan api na pashyati. Pashyan api na pashyati. Persons devoid of Atma Tattva do not inquire into the problems of life, being too attached to the fallible soldiers like the body, children, and wife. Although sufficiently experienced, they still do not see their inevitable destruction. This is fascinating. What they are saying is that if there is gross attachment to members and extensions of the family, this is the Grahamedi platform. The Grahamedi platform is a very narrow platform. It tends to identify with the body. It extends to wife. It extends to children. It extends to husband, children, the brothers, sisters, family members. Sometimes extends to the community, tribe, depending on where we are. But the idea is that they see repeatedly. They see this. They very repeatedly see destruction occur. but they still do not see the inevitable their destruction. They see destruction of others. They see the destruction of others repeatedly, but they cannot really foresee their inevitable destruction. Because if you really see your destruction and you're clear about it, then you would make plans for that as well. They see destruction, but they can't make any plans. It's inevitable, but they can't make any plans. And the reason for this is because there is an extraordinarily high focus on the identity of being attached and basically establishing an identity of being related to someone in this particular world. This is basically an issue where they're trying to manipulate material nature. When you try to manipulate material nature and make adjustments of material nature to make betterment in terms of the living conditions for family, then they are not even seeing the inevitable destruction. You can't solve problems in this world by being in this world. One cannot solve problems of this world by identifying with this world. One cannot solve problems of a lower nature with consciousness of the same level. One needs to be able to solve problems of a lower nature with a higher level of consciousness. We cannot solve problems of a lower nature with the same level of consciousness. There is a need to transcend and look down to see what is required. The reason why most people can't see that destruction coming, and the reason why most people can't really plan for the future, is because they are at the same level of consciousness. If you are in one single level of consciousness, you can't see beyond this. And they're only trying to make adjustments. So in their mind, if one job doesn't work, they try and find another job. In their mind, one house is not peaceful. Maybe I need an extra room, maybe 2 more extra rooms, maybe a bigger room. So they constantly make changes here and there because that is the understanding, that is the scope that they can see. This is nothing but movement of material nature. This is nothing but manipulation of material nature. They can't see that the destruction which is coming through is inevitable because they are on the same level as the destruction. They are being destroyed by every second of existence. They can't see it. And they're planning to resolve the issues of life by constant manipulation of matter. You cannot solve the problems of life at the same level of consciousness in which they were created. If one creates problems in the mode of ignorance, you need higher mode of passion to solve it. If one creates problems in the mode of passion and ignorance, you need to be in the mode of goodness to solve it. This is a fact. We cannot solve problems created by passion with more passion. You cannot solve problems created through the mode of ignorance by more mode of ignorance. You can't do it. It's not possible, but it is exactly what is being done in this world. They are trying basically to use the same level of material nature to resolve issues and problems created at that level. If problems are created by the material mode of passion, one needs to get into sattva. You cannot see the solution in passion. Passion has very limited vision. Passion, due to its agitated nature, has no capacity for vision. It has no capacity for vision. It is very narrow in its scope. That's the reason why the people who are supposed to lead society have to be Brahminical. Because the Brahmanas, by nature, are in sattva. They have a capacity to see the future. They have vision of the future. They can resolve issues of the future. You cannot resolve issues of the future by being in the same consciousness in which the problems were created, in the present were created. If there are problems in the present, they are being created by passion and ignorance. We can't resolve passion and ignorance problems by being in passion and ignorance. That's the reason why people can't solve the issues. They really can't solve the problems in life because they are trying to solve them at the same level of consciousness. So if a devotee were to meet any of us and ask us for a solution to their problems, the number one responsibility of anyone representing a movement is to shift their consciousness from where they are to the mode of goodness. When you make a shift from wherever the devotee is to the mode of goodness, then they would have vision, they would have the ability to resolve issues. We cannot solve problems in the same level of consciousness. That is being emphasized here. Persons devoid of Atma Tattva do not inquire into the problems of life. Being too attached, that word attached means being in passion, to the fallible soldiers like body, children, and wife. Although sufficiently experienced, they still do not see their inevitable destruction. You cannot see the future. It's blocked. So we can't solve problems of passion by being in passion. There is no scope of solving any problem in ignorance. There's some scope of at least becoming agitated enough to recognize there's a problem in passion. But none of this can be solved unless you bring in the mode of goodness. The number one strategy for a devotee who is a practicing sadhaka is to position themselves in sattva. Please position yourself in sattva. Move and upgrade your consciousness to sattva. This could include Guru Puja in the morning. The whole morning program of our temple was designed to bring in a massive quantity of sattva into the life of the devotee, the practicing sadhaka. By bringing sattva, they have the ability to manage passion. They have the ability to understand the mode of ignorance. Our morning program is beautifully situated where we come in touch with transcendence. But our regulative principles, the things that we are asked to do and we're not asked to do, etc., they're all designed for us to be in sattva. They're positioning ourselves to be in sattva. And this should be our number one preaching mission. Number one preaching mission is to bring people to a platform of goodness where they have the ability to rise further. The goodness platform is not our goal, but it is absolutely necessary if a devotee were to survive in Krishna consciousness. Because regardless of whom we are talking about in Srimad Bhagavatam, most of the problems faced by devotees of today and practicing Vaishnavas within our movement are because they're not in the mode of goodness. Most of the problems that people face in our movement is because they're consistently in touch with passion and ignorance. Because they're consistently in touch with passion and ignorance, their problems basically do not allow them, their problems basically can't be fixed unless they elevate themselves. So they need to be brought to the mode of goodness. So this should be a fundamental move. We should position ourselves in such a way that we are able to elevate ourselves to the mode of goodness. Because when you elevate to the mode of goodness, we're able to see where the damage is coming from. There's no vision in passion. There's no vision in ignorance. So this should be a very, very important part of how we share. So attending the morning program, for instance, if you strategize to attend the morning program, you're strategizing for goodness. You're getting the platform of goodness if you fix yourself in the morning program. Yeah, that is the platform of goodness. That allows you to take off. It's very important for us to think about it that way. Text 5. Tasmat Bharata Sarvatma Bhagavan Ishvaro Harihi Shrotavyaha Kirtitvasya Smartavyas Chetatabhyam. O descendant of King Bharata, one who desires to be free from all miseries must hear about, glorify, and also remember the personality of Godhead, who is the super soul, the controller, and savior from all miseries. Please remember this. Even though Sukadev Goswami in the second canto is talking about the desire to free themselves from miseries, he's talking about a desire of freeing ourselves from miseries. Is that the goal of Srimad Bhagavatam? No. This is not even encouraged by the acharyas. Srila Rupa Goswami is very clear. Anyabilashita shunyam, jnana karmadi anabratam, anukuliyena Krishna anushilanam bhakti uttama. Uttama bhakti, the path of uttama bhakti, cannot be contaminated by desires of jnana, neither can be contaminated by desires for fruitive action. This idea of freeing ourselves from miseries is nothing but jnana marg. The jnani recognizes that the world is filled with nations. The jnani is able to recognize that no amount of manipulation of matter is going to solve the problems. He needs to be out of this particular situation. The jnani wants to be out of the material mode of nature. He wants to be out of the material creation because he recognizes that no amount of manipulation, no amount of permutation and combination is going to solve this problem. It is not going to. So the jnani recognizes it. So this particular verse is talking about Freeing oneself from miseries. Freeing yourself from miseries is not the objective of Krishna consciousness. Being peaceful is not the objective of Krishna consciousness. Please understand that this is being mentioned here in Srimad Bhagavatam because there are those who are desirous of freeing themselves from miseries. But is this the scope of Krishna consciousness? Absolutely not. It is not the scope of Krishna consciousness. This is Jnanamat. This is basically a statement because in Srimad Bhagavatam, different levels of information are given to capture the attention of different levels of consciousness and different motivations. The Jnani has a motivation to resolve miseries of life. The Jnani has a motivation to resolve miseries of life. How? They say, you take me out of this world. I do not want births again. I do not want to come back again. They are not talking about service to the Lord. They are talking about not wanting to come back to this world. Please understand the distinction. You will find a Jnani worshipping Sri Sri Radha and Krishna. Why are they worshipping Sri Sri Radha and Krishna? They are worshipping Sri Sri Radha and Krishna to purify themselves of the effect of material nature. They are basically saying, I will worship the divine couple, but once I get liberated, I have nothing to do with the deities. I have nothing to do with the divine couple. This is the conception. That's the reason why it's extraordinarily flawed. It is a flawed conception because the concept of serving the Lord and serving the divine couple has the objective of purification. In other words, purification is even bigger than that service. In our situation, purification is important, but it is only important to the extent to which it allows us to serve. Our objective is service. Our objective is relationships, rasa. Our objective is not to just purify ourselves, rid ourselves of the problems of this world, and take off from here. As enticing as that prospect is, that is a very, very low benchmark for us to jump over. When one chants Harinam without abas, when one chants Harinam without aparad, when one chants Harinam without any aparad, which is namabas, it grants us this particular condition of experiencing a life of zero suffering. It liberates us. Nama at a very low level can liberate us. Our process at a very low level can grant the objective of the Jnani. So why should we set such a low bar for our goals? That's the reason why Srila Rupa Goswami is cautioning us. He's saying you better be careful because the Jnani who wants to purify himself, who wants out of this universe, is also going to be worshipping the divine couple. You are going to be worshipping the divine couple. The external part of worship might remain similar. They might do the same arati, they might have an understanding, but in reality, their objective is to purify themselves. Our objective is to develop a relationship. Very different. Because once they purify themselves and they're out of the universe, they say Krishna and Radharani's pastimes don't exist. That's where the offenses start. So it's a dangerous conception for us to even think of, that what Jnanis do in terms of their worship, what we do in our temples as worship is the same. What we do in our temples as worship to Radha Krishna is for us to develop a relationship of service. We are not interested in liberation. Liberation is not our motivation. That's the reason why the great stalwart devotees like Mother Kunti in the first canto, they talk about suffering. They say, bring upon us obstacles, bring upon us tribulations. We don't care. Don't remove us from your service because we are interested in your service. So that's the objective of the Vaishnava. The Vaishnava's objective is service to Krishna and Radharani. Our objective is not to basically say that Radha and Krishna, I'm worshipping you, I'm serving you, I'm doing pujari service every day in our home, in the temple, wherever I am, and I want to just purify myself. That's a very low-level objective. And it is dangerous if you don't have proper understanding, because what is being done by the Jnanis who want to purify themselves is almost similar to what we do. It is almost similar. The conception is different. Why we do things is very different from why they do things. So it's very important for us to understand that it is mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam, but Srila Sukadev Goswami is giving steps. This is Jnana Marga. Just as Krishna spoke about Jnana Marga in the 5th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, here Sukadev Goswami is starting with Jnana Marga. He's saying, if you want to desire to be freed from all miseries, you must hear about, glorify, and remember the personality of Godhead. He's telling them, engage in bhakti, even if your objective is jnana. The jnani requires bhakti. Bhakti is required by the process of jnana marga. The greater the devotion, greater the love, the greater the ability to serve the deities, the greater the level of purification, greater their ability to be rid of miseries. That is why this is being mentioned. So we do not want to take a cue from this saying this is what he wants us to do. He does not want us to worship the deities to rid ourselves of our miseries. Be very careful, because this is being spoken about in Srimad Bhagavatam to give qualification to different devotees of different levels of understanding. This doesn't mean that this is the platform that we have to adopt. Our platform, that's the reason why you need to again dovetail and understand the desire of our Guru Parampara. Our desire of a Guru Parampara is Anyabhilashata Shunyam, Jnana Karmadi Anavratam. This idea of ridding ourselves of miseries, deriving certain benefits, this has been rejected by our parampara. Why? It is because it's not a lofty ideal. Yeah. If one can have a relationship with Krishna in Vraja, if one can play with Krishna, if one can feed Krishna like Mother Yashoda does, why would we want to set an objective which is very low? It's like a very low bar for the extraordinary process that we have been given. But even if you want to achieve that low bar, glorifying, remembering the personality of Godhead is a superb, efficient process to do it. Very efficient process. So Sukadev Goswami is saying that even if you are in the objective of wanting to rid yourself of your miseries, glorify the Supreme Personality, remember the personality of Godhead. Now let's look at the next verse. You will see this verse was about Jnanis. Text 6. Etavan Sankhya Yoga Abhyam Swadharma Parinishtaya Janmalabha Parapumsam Ante Narayana Smritihi. The highest perfection of human life, achieved either by complete knowledge of matter and spirit, by practice of mystic powers, or by perfect discharge of occupational duty, is to remember the personality of Godhead at the end of life. Highest perfection. He is saying, complete knowledge of matter and spirit is Sankhya Yoga. Yes, you may be practicing Sankhya Yoga, but it is to remember Krishna at the end of your life. You may be practicing Ashtanga Yoga, it is to remember Krishna at the end of your life. You may be practicing Karma Yoga, but it is to remember Krishna at the end of your life. Why is this being mentioned by him? Because in all of these processes, Krishna becomes an instrument. Take the situation of a Karma Yogi. The Karma Yogi, and you have many examples are given in Bhagavatam. The Karma Yogi, for example, there is an example of a Prajapati. This Prajapati in the 6th canto, he wants to beget more progeny because that's his occupational duty. His occupational duty is basically to create more progeny, to engage in the process of creation very efficiently. And he's praying to Krishna, saying, give me the power to procreate efficiently. Basically, he's saying, give me the power to efficiently engage in my karma yoga of procreation, because that is my duty. I am a Prajapati. And he finds that he is not able to efficiently manage. And as a consequence, he wants the power to be able to do that very nicely. Now, the Lord who appears before him in the 6th canto he has 10 arms. How unusual. Don't ever think that when Krishna appears with more arms, there's no significance. There's great significance. He appears with 10 arms. What are these 10 arms with different weapons? Yeah? What are these 10 arms? These 10 different arms represent the weapons that can clear the obstacles in the 10 different directions of the material sphere. So he comes in that form, Krishna, after the prayers of this Prajapati. He then grants the benefit to the Prajapati, saying there will be no obstacle in these 10 directions for your karma yoga. Because in the 10 directions, the 10 different directions which are there in life, there is 10 different directions. East, right? Southeast, south, southwest, west, northwest, north. Then the upward direction, downward direction, you have 10 different directions. Yeah. Now, in these 10 different directions, what can happen is there can be obstacles to Karma Yoga. And this Prajapati in the 6th canto, he was worshipping Krishna to remove the obstacles in these 10 different directions. So Krishna comes with weapons. There are weapons associated with removing obstacles in the 10 different directions. He comes with 10 arms. Now, the objective of the Prajapati is not to serve the deity. His objective is to get the power to procreate without obstruction. Once that power is granted, Krishna disappears, which means in this particular objective of Karma Yoga, Krishna is an instrument. He is not the object. Please understand the difference. The objective for us is Krishna is the objective. For us, Radharani and Krishna are the objectives. We want to serve them. But in Karma Yoga, they are a means to an end. The deity is a means to an end. If I worship this deity, then I can attain my goal. The goal is more important than the deity. So Sukadeva Goswami is basically reminding them here, yes, you are a jnani. If you remember, you'll be purified. If you are a karma yogi, if you remember Krishna, then that is the actual perfection of your life, not achieving what you thought you want to achieve. If you are an Ashtanga yogi, then again, remembering the personality of Godhead is your perfection. The point we're trying to make is that there's emphasis here of the verse Anyabhilashita Shunyam Jnana Karmadi Anavritam. Srila Sukadeva Goswami is starting with setting the stage of sharing that don't get distracted. There's a big difference between our doing things without an understanding and our doing things with an understanding. Please understand your objective. Your objective is to become servant of the servants. We want to be proper servants. One cannot serve unless they fall in love with Krishna. So our objective is prema. Our objective is prema. Yeah. One has prema, they have the ability to surrender. Sharanagati requires prema. Once you surrender with love, then you have the ability to serve. Seva requires surrender and prema. Yeah? So this particular surrender process is being given to us in Bhagavad Gita and in the Bhagavatam simply to facilitate the point of service, our relationship with Krishna. Now, this is being cautioned. The cautionary statement, which is starting here in Bhagavatam by Sukadeva Goswami, this is the first chapter where Srila Sukadeva is speaking. He is talking about Anya Abhilashita Shunyam Jnana Karmadi Anavritam. He is emphasizing, yes, if you are a Jnana yogi, which is fine, you remember Krishna. That is the perfection of your process. If you're Ashtanga yogi, remember Krishna. If you are a Karma yogi, you remember Krishna, because whatever you do, the whole objective is to remember Krishna. This is the whole objective. Yeah, he is emphasizing bhakti. Now let's go into text 7. Prayena munayo rajan nivritta vidi serataha nairgunyasta ramante sma gunanukatane harehe. O King Parikshit, mainly the topmost transcendentalists who are above the regulative principles and restrictions take pleasure in describing the glories of the Lord. They take pleasure in describing the glories of the Lord. Yeah. What is it being said? He is basically saying, yes, there are Jnana yogis, there are Karma yogis, there are Sankhya yogis, there are Ashtanga yogis, but then the topmost transcendentalists who are basically above the regulative principles and restrictions, which means they're already liberated. They're already liberated. You need restrictions, you need regulative principles if you are within the material sphere, because we need to be purified. But if you're above the material sphere, then you're above the vidhi. Vidhi, which is the other name of Lord Brahma, is very specific for those who are in the material sphere. If you're above the material sphere, if you're transcendentally situated, then there really isn't any rule restriction, because there really isn't anything which is stopping you from attaining your goals. There is no material influence. There is no material challenge. As a consequence, he's saying, yes, there are different ways to proceed. There is Ashtanga Yoga, there's Karma Yoga, there's Sankhya Yoga, there's Jnana Yoga. They're all different things. But the topmost transcendentalists, those who are already liberated, because everybody else is trying to get liberated, here these transcendentalists are already liberated. They're already on the platform of liberation. There is no restriction on them. For them, they take pleasure in describing the glories of the Lord. So what is it which is the fruit or the most tasty fruit for those who are already liberated. It is the glories of the Lord. Krishna Katha is sweet even for those who are liberated. There lies the actual objective which one should have in Krishna consciousness. This is our objective. Our objective is not liberation. Liberation is a means to an end. It comes as a matter of fact. If you elevate your consciousness by the chanting of Harinam, there will come a day when you will experience being liberated from material energy. Even those who are practicing Krishna consciousness at a very rudimentary level, at a basic level, even for 2-3 years, have you not experienced a state of less anxiety? The answer is yes. If I were to ask everyone who is listening to this class, have you had a situation where within a year, 2 years of practicing Krishna consciousness, you have gone from an anxious, very disturbing state to a state where you're less anxious and you're more firmly situated? What is that? That is nothing but a few steps towards liberation. That is nothing but a few steps towards liberation. Liberation is to be freed from passion and ignorance. Anxiety is caused by passion. When you proceed and move from passion to a platform of goodness, then there's less and less and less anxiety. This is experienced by even those who are just taking few steps into Krishna consciousness. So what to say of those who are serious? What to say of those who have practiced it over several lifetimes and who are basically at the stage of understanding their relationship? Liberation is where they are. They're already liberated. What is to say of, basically being worried? It is a fact. If you complete the process and you cross over anartha nivritti, anarthas are essentially that which is connected to the modes of nature. When we transcend the modes of nature, to a large extent, it occurs in the highest level of goodness, where there might still be a few anarthas here and there, which are very subtle, which can't be discerned. But that is almost like being liberated. Yeah? Even anartha nivritti, once you cross over and you are establishing yourself in nishta, being fixed in the service of your guru, being fixed in the service of the Lord because you've understood your eternal relationship with him, then that is also a state which is almost close to being liberated. So please understand that our process basically considers liberation as tucca. We use the word tucca in Sanskrit. Moksha is tucca for the Vaishnava, because we are looking for the rasa of relationship, we are looking for the rasa of service. Our objective is not moksha. We don't care. You keep us here, you keep us in hell. Bali Maharaj, he was in Rasatala, he was in Patala. You keep us in any particular part, you engage us in your service, Krishna, that is all we are looking for. This is the Vaishnava conception. That's where there should be no confusion in our minds. So Sukadev Goswami is establishing the principle of Srila Rupa Goswami. Or rather, Srila Rupa Goswami took it from here. Everything our acharyas have given us has come from Bhagavatam. Anyabhilashita shunyam jnana karmadi anavritam, that is being addressed in the first chapter which Srila Sukadev Goswami is speaking. Yeah, he's saying this. He's saying very clearly, the topmost transcendentalists who are above the regulative principles and restrictions take pleasure in describing the glories of the Lord. So even for those who are liberated, what is delicious and what is worthwhile for them is the glories of the Lord. Idam Bhagavatam Nama Puranam Brahma Samhitam Aditavan Dwaparadav Pitur Dvaipayanad Aham. At the end of the Dwapara Yuga, I studied this great supplement of Vedic literature named Srimad Bhagavatam, which is equal to all the Vedas from my father, Srila Dvaipayana Vyasadeva. So here he is talking about studying the Vedas, studying the Bhagavatam from Srila Vyasadeva. He receives it. Parinishtito pi nairgunya uttama shloka leelaya grihita cheta rajarishe akhyanam yad aditavan. O saintly king, I was certainly situated perfectly in transcendence. Yet I was attracted by the delineation of the pastimes of the Lord, who is described by the enlightened verses. So Sukadeva Goswami is saying, I was already liberated. When I heard this, I was already liberated, but I was entranced. I was perfectly situated in transcendence, which essentially means that he basically had nothing more to attain in terms of the goals of life given by the Vedas. The 4 Purusharthas of the Vedas of Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, he is already in moksha, he is already liberated, he is in transcendence. And what was it which was very attractive to him? The description of the verses of the Bhagavatam given by Vyasadeva directly was practically the attraction. He said, I was attracted by the delineation of the pastimes of the Lord. The pastimes of the Lord, yeah, were extraordinarily sweet, and it was experienced by one who is liberated. Tadaham te bidishyami mahapaurushiko bhagavan yasya shraddhatam asu syan mukunde matihi sati. That very Srimad Bhagavatam I shall recite before you because you are the most sincere devotee of Lord Krishna. One who gives full attention and respect to hearing Srimad Bhagavatam achieves unflinching faith in the Supreme Lord, the giver of salvation. Now he is basically giving the qualification. You are very sincere. What is sincerity? We spoke of sincerity in the previous sessions as well. That which is in your heart is also that which you speak. The problem with this world is we are trained to be duplicitous. If you work in the corporate world, regardless of where you are, you can't be truthful. You're constantly trained to be duplicitous. There's duplicity training which is given, keep something in your heart, speak something else. Keep something in your heart, speak something else. This is our training because we are in the material world. Yes? This is politics. This is exactly what is called politics, where you keep something in the heart, but then represent something else. And we do it too. We engage in this. We should make an observation. We should make an observation during the day. We should examine our hearts to see how many times during the day, during the week, do we say things which we don't mean. How many times do we have this duplicity in our hearts where we don't represent our feelings properly? There's a lot of duplicity which is in our dealings. And Srila Sukadeva Goswami is basically saying you're sincere. What you have inside your heart is what you're expressing outside. And as a consequence, this is going to be given to you. You see, you are a sincere devotee. You want devotional service inside, you're also expressing it outside. Etan nirvidyamananam ichchatamakutubhayam yoginam nripanitnitam harer namanu kirtanam. O King, constant chanting of the holy name of the Lord after the ways of the great authorities is the doubtless and fearless way of success for all, including those who are free from all material desires, those who are desirous of all material enjoyment, and also those who are self-satisfied by dint of transcendental knowledge. See the 3 different categories. He is saying constant chanting of Harinam after the ways of the great authorities is the doubtless and fearless way of success for all, including those who are free from all material desires. We may be free from all material desires. We may have desires. What does it mean? Free from all material desires. What does it mean? It means having desires outside of this particular creation. We may have desires of moksha. Having a desire of moksha is freedom from material desires. Those who are desirous of all material enjoyment, someone who is desiring different flavors of material enjoyment, which is the karmi position. The position of a karmi is they want to have different kinds of activities through which they can experience the flavor of life. And also those who are self-satisfied by the dint of transcendental knowledge. Those who are already liberated. So those who have desires of moksha, those who have attained moksha, and those who basically have desires in this world. The best way and the doubtless and fearless way of success is to chant the holy name of the Lord. This is so authoritative, it is just perfect. Srimad Bhagavatam is Krishna. Nama is Krishna. If you chant Nama sincerely, we can understand Bhagavatam. If you read Srimad Bhagavatam sincerely, then Nama chanting becomes extraordinarily delicious because faith is given through coming in touch in both ways. You can come in touch with Krishna through Nam, it gives you faith. That faith makes the Bhagavatam reading even more revealing. When you come in touch with Srimad Bhagavatam, this is Krishna, non-different. It makes the chanting of Harinam extraordinarily powerful. So here he's basically saying, regardless of what you are, regardless of what your objectives were, simplify it to one particular activity of chanting Harinam. By doing so, you would practically have come in touch with a process which is very efficient, and it is a doubtless and fearless way. Why? It is not a means to an end. It is Krishna himself. Bhagavatam is Krishna himself. Nama is Krishna himself. There is no such thing as, I am doing Nama and because of Nama I'll come in touch with Krishna. No. Nama and Krishna are the same. Nama naminoho abhinnatvam. There is no difference between Nama. There is no difference between Nama and Nami. There is no difference between Bhagavatam and Krishna. By coming in touch directly, this is basically a doubtless way, because there is no, there is no medium here. There isn't a channel where you have to basically maneuver yourself, and then if you do something proper in that area, then you somehow or the other can come in touch with Krishna. No, this is Krishna himself. So there really isn't any doubt that you're in touch with Krishna. When you are in touch with Krishna, the more efficient you make this particular process, then the greater the advantage and the greater the propensity for success. Let's see, we'll do one more verse and then Kim pramattasya bahubihi paroksher hayanayariha varam muhurtam viditam gatatate shreyazetaha. What is the value of the prolonged life which is wasted, inexperienced by years in this world? Better a moment of full consciousness, because that gives one a start in searching after the supreme interest. What is the value of a prolonged life? Meaning, what is the point in living for hundreds and hundreds of years if you don't do something which is right? Inexperienced by years in this world. Inexperienced. Even though they have spent many, many years in this world, there's a certain inexperience. Why? Because they're not doing what one is supposed to do. Now, this is very aptly spoken by Sukadeva Goswami. Srila Sukadeva Goswami is 16 years old. He's only 16 years old. It is not that he has spent hundreds of years on the planet. Now, here's someone who's only 16 years old who is saying, what is the point in spending years and years and years in this world, basically, which are going to add to the inexperience? Someone is starting out the journey in inexperience, and then they come in touch with more inexperience, and then they add more inexperience. What is the point of many, many years of inexperience? Now, this is a 16-year-old realized soul who is liberated, who has come in touch with transcendence right from the womb of his mother, and who came in touch with the literary personality of the Godhead, Srila Vyasadeva, who basically received Srimad Bhagavatam, where Srimad Bhagavatam was ripened by coming in touch with Sri Shuka. Now, this personality who is 16 years old is basically saying, what's the point in being on the planet for years and years and years if all you're going to do is you start with inexperience and you keep adding inexperience on a day-to-day basis? So he's basically saying this. Now, who is he speaking to? He is speaking to Parikshit Maharaj, who has 1 week to live. Parikshit Maharaj has 1 week. This is being addressed to Parikshit Maharaj by a 16-year-old who is saying that don't worry about the amount of time you have. Even if you were to spend 1 second in proper consciousness, that is better than hundreds and hundreds of years of inexperience. If you experience proper consciousness even for a few seconds, that is more valuable than hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of existence. This is a great statement. Yeah? Because if you come in touch with the spark of faith, by coming in touch with one who has abundant faith, that injection of faith to the sound vibration is enough to disrupt our inexperience. The inexperience in our heart gets shaken out by coming in touch with a profound spiritual truth. The sound vibration of a realized soul can get into our ears and can get into our heart, and it can shake us out of inexperience. Now then we start having experiences, and those experiences become extraordinarily valuable. Yeah? Then the moment that experience comes in, they start searching for supreme interest. You start looking for supreme interest. Why? Because that particular spiritual spark has gotten into our heart and has disrupted our inexperience, and now we have an experience instead. Then he's giving the example of Maharaj Khatvanga. Khatvango namara rishihi jnanavayaptam ihayusaha muhurtat muhurat muhurtat sarvam utsrajya gatavan abhayam harim. The saintly king Khatvanga, after being informed that the duration of his life would the saintly king Khatvanga, after being informed that the duration of his life would be only a moment more, at once freed himself from all material activities and took shelter of the supreme safety, the personality of Godhead. This is being spoken of. So quite powerfully, the moment this particular king, he was a Raja Rishi. What is a Raja Rishi? A Raja Rishi is one who is a Rishi within, and externally he is performing his duties. He has realized his position from within, externally he is engaging in duty. Now this Raja Rishi, the moment he hears that you're not going to live for more than a few minutes, he immediately says, okay, I have to focus on the Supreme Personality of God. This Khatvanga was someone who was assisting the demigods in fighting with the Asuras for many, many years. They wanted to give a boon to him. When they wanted to reciprocate for his kindness by wanting to give him a boon, he basically was informed by them saying, you don't have much time. You really don't have much time. He drops everything. He says, okay, if I do not have time, then there's no point in having a discussion with you on what to do and what not to do about improving things. I just want to concentrate on the Supreme Person. Yeah. So this is good fortune. Please do not think that the experience of death is random. It is not random. People experience death in different ways. In this particular situation, in the case of Parikshit Maharaj, he was told death is coming. Yeah. In some cases, they're aware that they're going to leave because there's a certain degree of consciousness which makes them aware. Then they have the ability to plan. In certain cases, like Khatvanga, the demigods gave him a benefit saying, you're not going to live long. The moment he heard that, he wanted to basically make improvements. So it's quite powerful when you actually look at the way how you live practically arranges for how you leave this world. It's very powerful. The way you live is going to practically characterize how we're going to leave this world. Yeah. So the daily practice of how you live is how we're going to depart from this world. We're making arrangements for the final journey on a daily basis. This is very powerful. It has to be understood by us as well. Okay, so I'll stop here with this verse, and then basically we'll stop. We'll take questions, and then the next week we'll conclude this chapter. I wanted to lay the foundation because this is the first chapter when Srila Sukadev Goswami is actually, speaking. So why don't we start here, and then we'll go further. Yeah, why don't we just kind of stop here today, and then next week we'll go further. I'll take questions if you have any.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, Prabhuji, I think in fourth or fifth verse, you explain that about the moods, different moods that we have to be in. Like first we are in mode of passion, then we have to improve to mode of goodness, from ignorance, passion, and to goodness. But surprisingly, in a day or in an hour itself, our mood changes. Like suddenly in the morning aarti, morning program, we are in a mode of goodness, but then later on, maybe an hour later, or when we come back home, then we it changes to passion and ignorance sometimes. So how to deal with it?
See, fundamentally, the power of the morning program is such that if you do the morning program nicely, because the junction of the Brahma Muhurta, which is the hour and a half before sunrise, the junction of the Brahma Muhurta is such that whatever you do during sunrise can predominate your consciousness during the day. So if we position ourselves in such a way that we are chanting and we are engaging in Guru Puja, we are engaging in Arati, we are engaging in the worship of the deity early in the morning, that can predominate us throughout the day. The extent to which we have this very powerful experience in the morning, to that extent we can maintain our consciousness during the day. Yes, we might be overwhelmed at times, but the extent to which you can efficiently do the morning program, you will experience benefits. Over a period of time, as we make steady, slow progress, we will have the ability to elevate our consciousness to a point where whatever is happening around us doesn't disturb us. So it is normally said, and I'm just giving you a quote, and in a sense, it's an arbitrary percentage which I'm choosing here. In the stages where we are in early stages, 80% of our effort, and I'm using percentages arbitrarily. It is not an experimented, I would say, result of an experiment. It is more arbitrary to give you an idea. When you basically have, say, in the early stages, 80 to 90% of our effort, it simply goes towards keeping the mind steady. 80 to 90%. 10% goes towards experiencing and offering our, I would say, utmost best towards chanting of Harinam. This is the condition. As a consequence, what we experience is 10%. 10% is what we contribute towards actual Krishna consciousness. The remaining 80% is when you sit with the bead bag, the distractions, or mind going here, mind going there. This is basically the circumstance of most people who practice. But then, as we progress in Krishna consciousness, and the desires and the conditioning of a karma is slowly, steadily removed over a period of years, then we have the opportunity to shift this percentage. Then 80% goes towards chanting. 80% goes towards hearing when you're chanting Harinam. There's absorption in Krishna's names. The mind doesn't disturb anymore because it calms down. So this particular state of the mind not disturbing us anymore while we are engaging in devotional service comes because the mind itself is slowly elevated to the mode of goodness. This is a strategy. You need to position yourself carefully. So there has to be a certain way of sleeping, when to sleep, what to eat, what time to get up, doing the same things in the same order year after year. Then slowly, steadily, what we would find is that it becomes very easy for us to sit and chant. And when we chant, we are able to hear Harinam very clearly. This is a state where most of the effort goes towards simply the practice. Whatever remains is very minor. Yeah, it is basically some anarthas which remain, which also disappear quickly. Now, the point I'm trying to make is that for this particular state to happen over a period of years, one has to discipline themselves for the morning program on a daily basis so that they experience a predominant amount of consciousness in a proper way. That would help you dislodge karmic reactions efficiently. Then comes the time when you can efficiently use your morning hours, you can use your day in the service of the Lord. You can chant wherever you want. You can sit and chant, any time of the day, and it will have the same effect because your mind doesn't disturb you anymore. Yeah. So it's a gradual process. But what I'm trying to say is the most important aspect of this is to ensure that you are able to do what is required in the morning. Then you have everything else falling in place. I hope that answers your question. It's a process.
Yes, of course, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
Not at all. Is there any other question or comment?
Haribol, Prabhu.
Haribol?
Yeah, I had a few questions actually.
Mhm.
Maybe I'll start with so you mentioned karmas and gyanis
Mhm.
and their kind of mentality in service. So my question was, when we're supposed to offer our results of our work to the propagation of Krishna consciousness. So does that fall under the category of karma yoga, or is it karma mishrita bhakti?
Karma Mishrita Bhakti is having fruitive desires while engaging in bhakti. So we're talking about two different things there. Now let's understand where we are carefully. What we should do is we should make an observation of where we are in a holistic way. Yes, you are working and offering the results of your work to Krishna. Yes, you are at times basically desiring that you should be freed from certain difficulties in life. Yeah. which is the true with many of us. Basically, sometimes when we practice, we do feel overwhelmed, and sometimes we feel, Krishna, can you help us? All of this is true, but where are we predominantly in terms of a goal for the future? The goal for the future is to reach a platform where we are able to serve Anya Vilashita Shunya. The goal for the future is for us to be able to engage pure devotional service. That is our goal, and we're proceeding towards it. Along the way, we do have certain propensities, and those propensities, they get clarified and they get purified as we go along by coming in touch with sadhus, by coming in touch with our own experiences, or our upgrading of our service, upgrading of our sadhana, etc. So, karma mishrita bhakti is a circumstance where we have fruitive desires, and as a consequence, sometimes we are engaging in devotional service for the purpose of attaining such fruitive desires. This is true even for devotees who distinctly want to practice pure devotional service, but they end up standing in front of the divine couple and they start saying, if I get that job, maybe it'll be good for me. If I marry that girl, maybe it's going to be good for me. If I marry that guy, maybe it's good for me. This is basically karma mishra bhakti, where there is a propensity to bring in different desires in front of Krishna whilst engaging in pure devotional service. This is karma mishra bhakti. But I wouldn't really say that even such a devotee has that as the only objective in life. The only objective in life they do have is wanting to engage in pure devotional service. They may not understand what it is. They may not even understand what is pure devotional service. They may not understand, the conception of what that experience is. But they've heard from sadhus, they've heard from Guru, they've read in Srimad Bhagavatam. So there's faith, and as a consequence, they have a very holistic view of wanting to proceed towards it. But along the way, they display Jnana Mishra Bhakti, they display Karma Mishra Bhakti, but these is basically anartha. The anarthas come out in the form of Jnana Mishra Bhakti, Karma Mishra Bhakti. The anartha nivarti process, when due to the chanting of Harinam, removes Jnana Mishra Bhakti, removes Karma Mishra Bhakti, and that is when one becomes fixed and becomes qualified to be noticed by a resident of the spiritual sky. This is Nishtha. Then one gets to proceed further. Okay? Yes, go on if you have more questions.
Yeah, so thank you. So another, just leading on from the first question, was kind of, okay, so when, the position of Lord Nrsingadev, I've been told, is to remove obstacles in our devotional life, or remove obstacles that are in the way of us chanting Shuddhanam. But sometimes we pray that, okay, let's pray to Lord Nrsingadev for our material well-being or material welfare, etc. So is that like karma or Gyan Mishrita Bhakti, or is that what category does that fall under?
If it is the objective of offering prayers to see, Lord Nrsingadev has a very special place. Lord Nrsingadev has a very special place because he appeared purely for removing the obstacles in the chanting of Harinam, which is phenomenal. Amongst the different avatars of the Lord, he appeared on the call to protect the chanter of the holy name. Shri Prahalad Maharaj was wanting to chant Harinam, and the obstacles to chanting Harinam became so intense that the Lord practically appeared. So Nrsingadev is very closely associated with Namasmaran, very closely associated with the ability to chant Harinam. So now this is true. This is basically a circumstance where we worship him for that purpose. However, one may see their desires, their need for the desires to be fulfilled, and they might go to Lord Nrsingadev for this purpose. In that particular circumstance, they fall in the category of the Karma Mishra Bhakta or the Jnana Mishra Bhakta. So they might go to Lord Nrsingadev saying, Dear Lord, I have this problem and I need help from this problem. Dear Lord, I want to achieve this and I want help with this. Over the previous year, earlier on this year actually, was it this year? It was last year. After Karthik, I was visiting a town in southern India, which is very close to Ahobilam, which is the appearance of Lord Nrsingadev. And in that town, remarkably, the deity who is worshipped in every home is Nrsingadev. So it is like what they would call the deity who has been worshipped by generations and generations in the family. So they all have a Lakshmi Nrsimha deity whom they all go to. Now, these are all people who have learned the worship of Nrsimhadev through family tradition, not so by learning from a guru. This is through family tradition. They have seen the father do it, they have seen the grandfather do it. They are not, I wouldn't really say they are sadhakas. They are not sadhakas. They lead what you would call a normal life of a Hindu in India. You know, they have the propensities, they have the desires. But the point is, they're approaching Nrsimhadev. As a consequence, the Lord gives them an opportunity to fulfill the desires, but also to push them in the category of getting in touch with Nam, qualifying them for a higher experience as well. So, to answer your question, yes, look at what you're asking for. If it is not related to directly to the Panchanga Bhakti and to basically to be able to fit into the category of Panchanga Bhakti, it has a high risk of falling in the category of Jnana Mishra Bhakti or Karma Mishra Bhakti. It can. Yeah. But that in itself is not a huge problem if it is understood and if it is worked on. It is not a huge problem because you're still with Nrsimhadev. So you still can experience the removal of that obstacle as well over a period of time. Yeah. So one realizes that that particular opportunity also exists. So how do we recognize that we are in Karma Mishra Bhakti or Jnana Mishra Bhakti? Is for us to basically go through the process of seeing if there is contribution towards wanting to engage in pure devotional service. Is that why we are approaching the Lord, or are we asking for something specific? This is Karma Mishra Bhakti, but the Karma Mishra Bhakti can elevate one to proper Krishna consciousness if it is done properly, because then the devotee wakes up. He is in touch with Krishna. He wakes up and says, "Okay, I've been doing something wrong. Here I am. You know, I'm wanting to engage in pure devotional service." This is noticed by Dhruva, for example. Dhruva Maharaj chanting Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya initially was for the attainment of certain material propensities and gifts. But later on, due to the process of coming in touch with Nam and coming in touch with Sri Narad Muni, his propensities get purified where he is not desiring anything other than wanting to surrender and wanting to chant. So the point I'm trying to make is that yes, it is Karma Mishra Bhakti, Jnana Mishra Bhakti, but it certainly is far more powerful than a process which does not involve Krishna.
Okay, thank you, bro. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So in a few sessions, you've mentioned that without the knowledge of one's own relationship with Krishna, one's sort of, they cannot serve Krishna properly to the fullest extent. So how does one, if one may not know their sort of, so how does one deal with the frustration and anxiety of not knowing one's own identity?
One serves according to their present. This is the Siddhanta that we have been taught. Trinada pisunichena tarori vasahishnuna. What does it mean? It means that you recognize that where you are today is where Krishna wants you to be today. You accept it in that particular understanding. Go with that understanding. And by doing so, you act with courage, you act with fortitude on the present opportunity. You push yourself to the maximum. Because you also remember, Krishna says in 9.22 of the Bhagavad Gita, I will preserve what you have and I will carry what you lack. As a consequence, why should we think that Krishna is not doing his job of preserving what we have and carrying what we lack? If we lack more information for us to be better servants, Krishna will step forward and make the arrangement. As of today, he has already given us enough information to act as a servant. Take what is today fully, push yourself to the furthest limit, and you will suddenly find more information coming through on the Swarup. Does it make sense?
Yes, bro. Another thing on that was, so in one of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's writings, Bhajana Rahasya, he says there is a distinction between Archana and actual performance of bhajan, and it explains that actual performance of bhajan is with knowledge of one's own swarup, with all these different aspects of swarup, or the 11 different aspects. So does it mean all the bhajan, so-called bhajan that we are doing now is all like a waste, or what?
I think I think we should extend the previous answer to this as well. Because what is it which allows us to serve? What allows us to serve is to understand our identity. If I know who I am, if I understand who is Krishna, then there is a spontaneity in this relationship. Mother Yashoda doesn't have to force herself to serve Krishna as a son. Mother Yashoda is naturally in Vatsalya Bhav as Krishna's mother. That is the advantage of knowing the Swarup. Knowing your Swarup is the advantage of knowing what your relationship is. It makes it completely natural, the attraction natural, the reaction natural and spontaneous. This is Raga Marga. The attraction is basically spontaneous. Yeah, it is spontaneous. It is not being forced upon because your guru tells you, wake up in the morning and you must chant 16 rounds. Or your guru tells you, you have deities, you've got to worship them. Or the guru tells you, this is a service that you have to do. That is vidhi. That is being forced upon us because of the relationship between us and the guru. The spontaneity is missing because the relationship is not known. Once the Swarup is known, there's spontaneity. It's natural. So that's the difference. So one should continue in vidhi. One should continue in vidhi. And this is a very important thing. Sometimes we notice that we jump the gun. Devotees jump the gun thinking that Raga Marga spontaneity is a far more efficient process than vidhi. Vidhi, worshipping of the deity in rules and regulations, offering the upacharas with procedure, allows you to understand that you are walking on the road to the spiritual sky. If you step out of vidhi without knowing your Swarup, then where we could end up, because the road, which leads to that, you could be walking on the side of the road, we could end up in a ditch and thinking that we are walking and then we are not even moving anywhere. We just do not know. So there's a need for safety. The safety net is to follow rules and regulations, go according to vidhi. Regardless of how advanced we feel, it's important to go according to vidhi, because then we know for sure that we are on the royal road of bhakti. And even when you're walking according to rules and regulations in vidhi, there's purification, there's opportunity, there's anartha nivritti, and we finally also understand our Swarup. Then we continue the same process of vidhi. You notice this when you read the Sadgoswami Ashtakam. These were realized souls who were in Vraja, they were practicing in their Swarup. But what did they do? They were chanting a fixed number of rounds, they were paying a fixed number of obeisances, they were doing parikrama. This is vidhi. Why was it that these great personalities were following vidhi? They were following vidhi because the vidhi allows you to know that you're on the road. So spontaneity can come in vidhi. Don't move away from vidhi rules and regulations in a hurry. Learn what is the rules and regulations. Do it properly. You would immediately, at the natural state, based on service, based on mercy, qualify yourself for Swarup and being able to understand what it is to move forward. This is addressed by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. This issue is addressed by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. In Raghavatma Chandrika, he has spoken about it. And he has spoken about it quite clearly that in the movement of Lord Chaitanya, we need to do nothing but serve Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya is he's not Kunja Bihari Krishna. He is not in the spiritual sky in the different groves. Lord Chaitanya is preaching through his servants in different parts of the world. He is going to places which are unspeakable. He is giving the opportunity of Naam to people who can't even imagine getting Naam. So we are in the moment of serving Lord Chaitanya. So when you serve Lord Chaitanya very sincerely and follow vidhi, because Lord Chaitanya is following vidhi, he's a sannyasi, a very strict one. When that relationship is established properly, then Lord Chaitanya's mercy will come through. And that would allow us to engage in our Swarup Siddhi, and we'll be able to move forward, in Ragamad. Does it make sense that the transition has to be through proper service as our predecessors did? But we should also understand that is also a sure short way of success rather than taking a side cut which can land us in trouble. Yeah?
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you, Bobby. Yeah. Yeah, I suppose the danger of jumping the gun is kind of there's a danger of sentimentalism or some kind of sahajaism or something.
Yeah, sahajaism can come. I think the greater danger is not so much in being a sahaja. The greater danger lies in one of the greatest snares of Maya is to make someone think they're advanced. Yeah, it is really one of the dangerous and I would say this is basically a very subtle and extraordinarily dangerous snare which is posed by Maya, is to make a devotee think they are advanced. So it is better to follow rules and regulations, better to follow Vidhi, better to follow in the footsteps of the Acharyas, the Goswamis, who were so strict with the external practice. Because external practice can be measured. External practice and disturbances in external practice can be recognized. You see, if you don't chant tomorrow, for example, God forbid, you can recognize that I'm not chanting properly. But it is very difficult to monitor internal progress unless you can monitor external activity. So monitoring external activity, keeping benchmarks, and understanding our progress through external sincerity is very, very important while growing internally. Yeah? So this is not to say that one shouldn't be eager to taste spontaneity. One should be very eager. One should be very eager internally as well. But walk on the royal road of Vidhi. It's safer. And the time will come when Lord Chaitanya would just give us everything in a spontaneous, overnight. It can happen even overnight.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul.
Sure.
No more questions from me.
Sure, bro. No, it was very nice questions, though. Nice. Thank you. Any other comment or question?
Just following on that, what you were saying, are there many devotees who are on the spontaneous platform?
It's hard to recognize. There are, because it's a natural progression. It is a natural progression. So one doesn't want to fight it. One doesn't want to say that I have to be rule bound, because that will also be extraordinarily restrictive. And that is generally not the goal of Krishna consciousness, to be restrictive. We want things to flow naturally. And there are quite a few of the devotees who are quite spontaneous. But the point which I'm just trying to make is that you can be spontaneous even when you're rule bound. It is difficult to recognize this statement unless you practice it. One can be spontaneous even when you're rule bound. I'll give you an example, perhaps. There was this Mataji who was a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, and she used to serve alone in New Vrindavan, when New Vrindavan was basically, in the sense, everybody used to go out, and she was practically the only pujari who used to serve Jagannath, Baldev, Subhadra. And if you're the only pujari and you have to make all the offerings for the deities, you don't have time to chant and you don't have time to read. She used to wake up at 1:30, but it is said by those who used to be with her that she used to jump out of bed. So there was a certain spontaneity and eagerness to grab the bead bag and chant. This eagerness to chant comes when there is advancement, when there's real taste, ruchi. She used to jump out of bed and grab a bead bag and chant. And she basically used to be extraordinarily focused in using a time that she used to keep open books of scriptures around the pujari kitchen, in the pujari room, etc. So she would have like the Chaitanya Charitamrita, some volume being open somewhere. She would have a volume of Bhagavatam, a volume of, whatever else was required then, whatever Srila Prabhupada had offered, because not all books are available then. And what she will do is, when the milk is boiling, she would go read a couple of pages. When Jagannath has been offered as bhoga and she's waiting to remove the offering, she'll read a few pages. When she's cutting vegetables, she used to hang the beads in front of her and count the beads while cutting vegetables. That was the strength of her mind. She used to complete her rounds and do it. The point I'm just trying to make is that Spontaneity is recognized from within by the spontaneity with which we call upon Harinam, the spontaneity with which we act out on service. It is recognized. And it is safer to walk on that particular path than to extend it to behavior which probably involves, for example, one may qualify it as sahajiya, where they might feel that they are a gopi, they end up dressing up in a woman's clothing while they're male. These are disturbances to other practitioners. It may work for you, but it is disturbance to other practitioners. It doesn't mean that all of them who do it are bad. It simply is a disturbance. So the Goswamis used to dress in a towel, a gamcha. They used to sit under a tree and they used to call upon Harinam, but they were serving the divine couple in the eternal sorrow in the spiritual sky whilst doing Harinam very strictly. You read about it in Sadgoswami Ashtakam, X number of repetitions of Harinam, so many times of parikrama, so many times of dandavats to devotees. This is basically vidhi. Why would they do vidhi while they could be spontaneous? They did it because there can be a certain spontaneity that can be experienced even in that. Yeah, it is actually very powerful, but it has to be experienced. It is difficult to describe theoretically how strict practicing of Krishna consciousness can encompass the spontaneity aspect as well. Yeah, it can be experienced, absolutely. So one doesn't have to walk out and be completely, unpredictable. That's not what our system is. So that's the reason why I'm saying one needs to remember the context that we are preachers. One needs to remember that the context that we are servants of Lord Chaitanya, who was very strict. During the day, Lord Chaitanya used to discuss Srimad Bhagavatam, very specifically Dhruva Charita and Prahalad Charita, and he used to make Gadadhar Pandit, Sri Gadadhar Pandit used to read that every day. Dhruva Charita, Prahalad Charita, during the day. In the night, the confidential discussions with very advanced souls used to take place with Swarup Das Damodar Goswami and with Ramananda Raya. Yeah, so he was very careful in basically exposing what I would call as very confidential aspects of Krishna consciousness to everybody in a very, I would say, casual manner. So since we are worshippers of Lord Chaitanya and we are followers of Lord Chaitanya, it behooves us that we follow in his footsteps, where we present ourselves for his service very strictly. We assist in the preaching mission because that's his mission. And then he gives us mercy for us to be able to experience who we are in the spiritual sky. This confirmation is given by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur that it is a natural delineation that one is sincerely serving Lord Chaitanya. They get mercy from him to become a part of the spiritual sky. That's the reason for me making a mention that if you focus on this, the other is also given, so you're not missing out.
Thank you very much, Prabhu. Thank you. Very, very advanced subject, I think, there, but very interesting as well.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure. Is there anything else? Any question or comment before we move? I'm not moving anywhere. I'm in Vrindavan. Sorry.
One small question, Prabhu. When you mentioned
Yes.
about duplicacy of a person, like in a day,
Mhm.
we say something, but inwards we are different. I mean, this is the very, frequently we do this. So how can we address this kind of situations, Prabhu?
By understanding that we do this, that's the first point. Making a very deep, I would say, conscious attempt to shift and become, I would say, sincere in terms of representing ourselves truthfully, because the issue is as follows: we can't escape from an internal state and become all right. So one can't really say that I can be a crook during the day and then I'll come back home and I'll be a nice devotee. You can't do that because you're the same person. You're the same person, aren't we? Yeah, we're not different. So if we are a crook during the day, we can't come before Krishna and the devotees and the Vaishnavas and say, now I'm going to be straightforward. It doesn't work that way. If you're a crook outside, you're going to be a crook with Krishna as well. But we can't cheat him. We can't cheat Mahaprabhu. So we can't really do that. So what I'm trying to say is one needs to have that understanding, and one has to be very clear that this is an issue. If it is spotted, then we cultivate a consciousness of weeding this out. Just as we weed a garden, we need to weed some of these issues out. This one particularly is very problematic. It is problematic because we would think we are sincere, we may not be. Because we would have all kinds of thoughts inside, but then externally, because we are used to pretending, we would think that we are sincere. Then it becomes a huge problem. So it is important for us to read this out and say that in a given day, I'm going to represent what I am inside externally as well. Let me face the consequences. Now, it doesn't mean that we are brash. We can be tactful when we represent ourselves.
Right.
Yeah? But you need to kind of identify it and make a conscious attempt to stop that pattern. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, because normally when you mention about corporate culture, that is where, for example,
Yeah.
I have a subordinate who is looking for a promotion, and I give him some false promise that you'll be promoted, don't worry. But
No,
normally,
this is an issue. This is a contamination. See, that's the reason why I'm saying coming to the temple and doing menial service is important, because then you become Krishna Das. Yeah?
right,
So you kind of reinforce the identity very efficiently.
right.
Is there anything else? Okay, if there aren't any more questions or comments, then we'll close for tonight and we'll come back again the following week. I had prepared for the following week as well, but I couldn't contain the topic within the hour. So the next week we'll complete this chapter and move on to the next one. Okay, because the next part of it, some of the questions that some of you asked is being addressed by Shukadev Goswami. He's talking about the frame of mind. He's talking about what to do to basically fix the mind, etc. But he's approaching it from the perspective of someone who is operating with 100% focus on wanting to do sadhana. But we're going to address it on how we could balance that particular situation of keeping the mind still, keeping the mind focused while we are also engaging in activities in the world. And what is it that we can do otherwise? So we'll talk about it the following week because it's an interesting topic. Okay. Thank you very much for joining me. Hare Krishna. We'll again meet next week. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.